Good afternoon. Thanks for either preponing, postponing, or foregoing lunch, and thus being with us today in this session on putting the I in ESG, inclusion of persons with disabilities in sustainability practices. My name is Jürgen Menze. I'm a disability inclusion specialist at the International Labour Organization, the ILO, and I'm also the coordinator of the ILO Global Business and Disability Network, which is hosting this session. We're joined here by the panelists. I'll introduce them in a moment, just to explain a little bit, very shortly, what the Global Business and Disability Network of the ILO is and what the ILO is. The ILO, the International Labour Organization, is the specialized agency of the United Nations family on the world of work. So we're trying to create better and more work, employment for all people around the world. And the Global Business and Disability Network tries to do that specifically for persons with disabilities and specifically in the private for-profit sector with businesses around the world. We currently have more than 40 multinational enterprises in this network. Two of the networks are also represented here, Capgemini with Karine, Vasselin, Vice President, Group Diversity and Inclusion. Then we have Florian, Koemm, General Counsel, Africa, Middle East, and Head of Legal and Compliance Operations, Siemens Energy. So Capgemini, Siemens Energy, two of our more than 40 multinational enterprise members. Then on this panel, we also have Maher, Founder and General Partner, Samaritan Partners, and Giulia Faedo. She's a Sustainability Reporting Manager at the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group. You might know them more as EFRAG, the acronym. Now, just to explain a little bit also how this session will flow. Hopefully it will flow and we're not going to get stuck. So after my initial remarks, I'll continue, unfortunately, a little bit more. Then you will be relieved. You might get some relief by watching a short video that we have prepared on this topic of inclusive ESG/sustainability practices. And then I will ask questions to the panelists. It's an amazing panel we have. The first round will be a personalized question to each of the panelists, and then we have a second round of questions, which is a comment question. And after that, we hope to have about 15 minutes, 10 minutes for questions from you, sitting here, because we want to hear from you what you think, what you're curious about, and what you're doing maybe on this topic of inclusive ESG. Now, just on this topic, you might know that, why are we talking about this topic, sustainability? First, we need to understand that traditionally, company performance was basically purely measured in terms of financial performance. I was just talking to a company colleague earlier, and she told me, look, just today we released the numbers to our shareholders. Of course, that's still very important and can be stressful. At the same time, shareholders and other actors understand it's not only about the financial performance, it's about how business deals with environmental and social consequences when they do business. And that led to a higher demand to measure company performance beyond the financial metrics. And some of these non-financial metrics developed in what we sometimes label environmental social governance, ESG. And investors use ESG frameworks as a way to evaluate risks. So it's more of a risk management framework, whereas companies also then try to improve through ESG frameworks their long-term sustainability and ethical impact. The challenge we have with the acronym ESG, Environmental Social Governance, is that there's not a globally applicable definition of it. So the lack of a very clear definition at global level can, of course, also provide risks in how actors use it. It can open doors for greenwashing, for purple washing, using purple as a color of the disability rights movement. But nonetheless, we tried, as Global Business and Disability Network, to make sure there is an accountability framework, so to say, when companies work on ESG, sustainability issues. And not only that, we launched at our global conference in November at the ILO headquarters in Geneva, we launched a business leaders pledge on disability inclusive sustainability efforts. 9 leading company members, top managers in leading companies in our networks have already signed this pledge, committing to do better in this nexus of disability inclusion, sustainability, ESG. It's an open-ended commitment. Any company that is already part of our Global Business and Disability Network can sign this pledge. And to help these organizations that pledged to do better on disability inclusion and sustainability, we try to help them with a technical guide that we launched also in November last year. And just also to a shout out to my colleague Beatrice, who will be sitting here somewhere. She will explain more about the guide we launched in November and the Business Leaders Pledge this afternoon at 5 p.m. in this session on ESG. Now, a little bit of what I said, we will now see in a 2-minute video, not too long, and then we'll finally get to the opportunity to pick the brains of our amazing panel. So please go ahead with playing the video, if it's possible.
The value of environmental, social, and governance (ESG) assets worldwide is expected to surpass $40 trillion by 2030. The inclusion of persons with disabilities is becoming central to ESG practices and sustainable business strategies. The World Bank promotes the concept of return on disability, showing that disability inclusion gives companies a competitive edge and improves financial returns. Disability inclusion is crucial to the social pillar of ESG frameworks, but it should also be integrated into the environmental and governance pillars. Key stakeholders, companies, rating agencies, and investors are vital in incorporating disability inclusion into ESG strategies. Companies are encouraged to recognize both the financial and social impact of disability inclusion. This double materiality strengthens long-term resilience. Rating agencies need clear definitions and consistent scoring methods to include disability in their assessments. Investors are seeking more disability-related key performance indicators, such as data on workforce representation, especially at the board and senior management levels. The ILO Global Business and Disability Network offers practical guidance in its report, Putting the I in ESG, Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities as Strategic Advantage of Sustainability Practices for Corporates and Investors. The guide proposes 10 key performance indicator areas, aligned with global and regional sustainability standards, including the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and European Sustainability Reporting Standards. These key performance indicators address areas such as workforce diversity, workplace accessibility, and customer satisfaction. Disability inclusion presents a strategic opportunity for companies and investors. Embracing it leads to a socially just and sustainable future.
So this is a video we launched in November, and you can find it also on YouTube if you want to rewatch it. It gives a bit of the overall context of also our discussion today. So, as I mentioned, we'll now engage the panelists in the first round of questions. And Karine, very happy to have you with us. So Karine, at first, congratulations. I heard you're going to win a zero. I mean, you and your company will win a Zero Project award later today. So congratulations also. Capgemini is not only a member in the Global Business and Disability Network Steering Committee, your CEO, Capgemini CEO, was also one of the first ones who signed the pledge I was talking about, disability inclusive sustainability efforts. So, and thanks for that, pushing that. So how does this leadership at the highest level of your company, Capgemini, change the way you work on sustainability issues, and what are the concrete actions Capgemini taking in this area?
Thank you, Jürgen. Hello to everyone. So yes, we do have the chance to have the support of our CEO, who is personally committed around inclusion, and notably on inclusion of all abilities, whether people with disabilities or neurodivergent, because he signed himself and on his own initiative the Valuable 500 Pledge and the ILO Global Business Disability Pledge. And having his support and the pledge, I think, makes a difference, because first, this creates a strong link with sustainability, accessibility, and our core business. I think it's already a part of our DNA because we are a diverse company by nature, and our purpose is precisely to try to unleash the power of technology to have positive impact. But more than that, for us, it's a business enabler because it unleashes our capacity to innovate, to develop solutions that are less biased and that better address the diversity of the needs of our clients and of their own customers. So it is really a great asset, and on top of that, to keep on attracting the best talent, and talent are everywhere. The second, I think, insight and accelerator is that signing this pledge paves the way for us towards our mid-term and sustainable ambition, because we have engaged in a cultural shift, putting sustainability at the core of our operating model. And this sustainability trajectory has really two legs. One, which is very important on environmental issues, but the second one, which is really growing and becoming as important, which is social sustainability, and of course embracing disabilities and accessibility is a key component of this. So through the pledge, through the business leaders commitment, we have secured this midway transformation, because it takes time to engage everybody from top to bottom into this transformation and into this new way of doing business and doing work together. And third element, and this is where the pledge and the guide is very instrumental. It really gives us a very detailed framework to address accessibility and disability inclusion into a very organized and structural way, because we have to have a kind of a 360 approach. So once again, it starts by governance, and we have, for instance, appointed in France a disability business POC in every business unit. Then it goes with developing this accessibility roadmap and addressing all aspects in the company, trainings, communications, workplace, of course, and digital accessibility, because we work a lot with software and apps. As Neil was mentioning in the previous panel, the supply chain, the discussions we're having with our supplier are very important too, because they contribute to this overall sustainable roadmap and accessible roadmap. And so, for instance, we really try to have more and more suppliers that are from this sector protégé or adapted sector, and they now cover a very full scope of activities, and including cutting-edge technologies. And as a partner of Handilab in France, which is an incubator for startups focused on disabilities, we are trying to encourage this business growing and scaling up. But for me, the most difficult part, some aspects that we still need to progress on, is, I would say, developing more career opportunities for our colleagues with disabilities or neurodivergence. I'm sure there are lots of them having already a great career, but we don't know them. We don't measure it. First, because most of them didn't disclose their status, or when they have, it's confidential. So we proceed more by role models, trying to be one myself, but I have many other colleagues in different roles of the companies, in portfolio, in data and insight. And progressively, all together, we are trying to develop this culture of trust, to encourage more and more people, and notably through our employee network, capability or neuroability, to disclose their status so that we could work better on addressing their specific needs.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Karine.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Now look, Siemens Energy, represented here by Florian Koemm. Florian, you're representing the company that is also part of the ILO Global Business and Disability Network, and Siemens Energy was one of the first companies that has used the self-assessment tool that we have for free online in several languages to assess where most pressing gaps are in a company, corporate context when it comes to disability inclusion. So can you tell us about how Siemens Energy used the self-assessment tool and how it can inform corporate sustainability reporting?
Of course, but first I want to waste a couple of seconds of my 5 minutes to say a big thank you for having me and for making me feel so important by this impressive United Nations pass. I love it, and then I get to speak with this microphone. That's super. So I'm really having a good time here. So thanks for having me. On a more serious note, so what are we trying to do by utilizing the self-assessment? So we're trying to do what has been said in the previous panel. We're trying to make our progress measurable, right? We're trying to use it as a KPI to drive disability inclusion. How did we do it? When we first tried, we got it totally wrong. So we used it at a board level in a multinational, and then in a discussion with Susan got upset. Said that's not how it's supposed to be. Disability inclusion is very local. You need to take it on a local level. So we said, okay, yeah, lesson learned. Let's do it on a local level. So what did we do? We identified 5 areas or countries where we could take it, where we believe that disability inclusion was already developed okay-ish. Now you can also criticize and say, well, that's also not right because you're not getting the complete picture, but at least we would get an answer and we would get a picture, right? So that's why the countries are Brazil, the United States, UK, Germany, and the Middle East. And then I found some allies who were willing to work on it. Dominic, a good friend and supporter, and he really drove that project. So throughout the last year, we were able to take the self-assessment in all these regions, and it gave us a result that pretty much confirmed what we were already thinking. So we're trying to approach disability inclusion in 3 steps. One is the absence of discrimination. So Siemens Energy wants to be a home for everybody. We thought we're pretty good at that, and the self-assessment actually also confirmed that. It still helps us in giving some tweaks here and there, how to word things, how to design policies, and so on, but we're okay-ish there. On the physical, and which would be the second step, physical and online accessibility, we're also on a good track. We're not there yet, and same picture here, confirmation. And where we're really horrible is in embedding disability inclusion in literally every business decision that we take, in every process, in all that we do. And we're clearly not there yet, and there were also some helpful hints through taking it. We can, of course, now take the rating that we got, included in our ESG reporting, and that's great, because that's always when I've been approached by the guys in accounting, say, hey, Florian, what have you done in disability inclusion? Can you please send us some nice pictures and maybe also some nice numbers? So I can now. That's of course, very helpful. These are the positive aspects. Struggles. First of all, one struggle that we have identified with the self-assessment itself is that the section on customers doesn't really apply to us because we're a B2B business and it's mainly designed for B2C. We have been offered by Susan at the ILO GBDN to work on that. I'm aware that the ball is on our side, so we need to get back. It's just a matter of making room for this important task. And the second struggle really is to action all the findings, and this simply takes a tremendous amount of time. So what we're trying to do is really take every finding one by one, identify the low-hanging fruits, action these first, and then just work our way through. Big question that remains is, when shall we take it again? So the initial thought was to do it every year. My personal belief is it will be too early to do it year over year. We will, the time that it takes to action all the items is just too long, so we will not see a significant difference compared to last year. So my thought is that we probably have to move this to take it every 2 years. Otherwise, we will only generate frustration, which is not what we're trying to accomplish. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Florian. Now, if Florian's remarks made you more curious about the self-assessment tool, please check it out on the website of the Global Business and Disability Network, businessanddisability.org. It's free of charge, can be applied, can be used by any company around the world, independent of jurisdiction. It gives you a nice overview of where the most pressing issues are, the gaps, and it's an internal management tool. It's very nice of Florian to share some experiences, but you don't have to do that. As a company, you can just apply it and keep it to yourself. We're, of course, always happy to hear how it worked for you and what you learned from it. Now, moving from our company members in the Global Business and Disability Network to our allies and partners, Chris. So you're representing basically the investors community in this panel, and last year I mentioned the guide earlier, and Karine also thanks for referring to the guide on inclusive sustainability/ESG issues. It's targeting not only companies but also investors. So can you share a little bit more about what your company, Samaritan Partners, does, and why investing in disability promotes corporate sustainability?
Sure. Thank you, Jürgen, and thank you to Zero Project, excuse me, for inviting me to join the panel today. Quick description for me: I'm a middle-aged male with blonde hair that's getting a little grayer every day, and I'm wearing a pink shirt and a navy blue suit. Quick background on me and Samaritan. So Samaritan Partners is a social impact venture capital fund that invests in the disability sector. My background is actually operational. I spent the last 25 years as an operator and a multi-time CEO of a variety of VC-backed companies. And in parallel to that, for the last 20 years, my wife and I have raised two beautiful daughters, both of whom live with disabilities. And so our investment thesis at Samaritan is investing in early-stage for-profit companies that are providing products and services to and/or creating employment opportunities for the disability community. The companies that we typically invest in are building products and services that they would sell into larger corporations or would be very disruptive and compete with those same corporations. Before I give a couple of examples of disability-driven innovation and sustainability, I think we should look at the numbers first, and I'm going to actually cite a research report from Accenture, and I want to get the name right, but back in 2023, the Disability Inclusion Imperative, the figures are pretty impressive and eye-opening. And so that report said that companies that prioritize disability inclusion see 1.6 times more revenue, they see 2.6 times more net income, and they see 2 times more economic profit. In addition to that, those companies also reported having increased problem solving, increased innovation, and a 25% higher revenue per employee. There's a new book coming out that you may want to take a look at, and the author is here, Bob Ludke. It's called Case Studies in Disability-Driven Innovation. Pretty appropriate for what we're talking about here this week. And the premise of that book is when companies take the universal design mindset, it ultimately benefits all the stakeholders. I think in today's day and age in corporate America, it's very much about the shareholder. It's one stakeholder. And so Bob's book really outlines how, and with many examples, how it really is about all the stakeholders. So when you take that universal design approach, it benefits your customers, your employees, it benefits your market expansion, your profitability, which ultimately makes your shareholders very happy, and ultimately then it benefits broader society. And so I think Bob's book is a wonderful example of when you are focused on building an inclusive economy, I personally believe then by default it's going to be a sustainable economy. And so a couple of quick examples, do I have a couple minutes for a couple of quick examples from the startup world, which is where we're investing, and how they are focused on not only investing in inclusion and accessibility, but really showing that they can do that in a sustainable way. Mike Buckley this morning, full disclosure, Samaritan's an investor, I think was a great example of that. There are a number of different use cases for Be My Eyes, but the one he shared this morning about putting their technology into call centers and contact centers, where the time to support and serve a blind customer goes from 20 minutes to 10 minutes to 4 minutes, okay? That's a better customer experience. It's 80% greater efficiency from the business standpoint. And so I think just a wonderful example. Another example, a company that we saw present yesterday in the innovation, the technology innovation session yesterday afternoon, is a startup called Equivalent, and they've developed a smart graphic. And if you don't know much about graphics, which I didn't before talking to Heather and her team in the last year, today it's a pretty onerous process. And so an engineering or dev team has to manage light and dark mode for desktop, tablet, as well as mobile. And so just think about the inefficiencies across all of that of making those and then maintaining them. And those files tend to be very large, right? So there's a real inefficiency from a sustainability standpoint in terms of energy consumption. Well, Heather's company can take all of that, put it into one smart graphic that's responsive across light and dark mode and all those different environments, and the size of that file is 96% smaller. So two really good examples, and one last example, and then I'll wrap up. In the travel space, by the way, not an investor and equivalent at this point, another company that we've invested in called Wheel the World, which is in the accessible travel space you may have heard of. In the US in particular, destinations and hospitality companies are starting to lean into accessibility more. Not necessarily out of the goodness of their hearts. They realize that, oh, there's an economic opportunity here. People with disabilities like to travel just as much as people without disabilities. And when they travel, they typically travel with friends and families and caregivers. If you can't accommodate the one person in the group with a disability, it's likely the entire group's going to go somewhere else. And so when you think of the disability community as being, say, 15 to 20% of the population, but when you add in the families and friends and caregivers they travel with, all of a sudden your market is now upwards of 60%. And so in the US alone, people with disabilities take upwards of 40 million trips a year. You combine their families and friends and caregivers that travel with them, it's a $120 billion market. That's a massive opportunity. And obviously when you use inclusive design like Wheel the World does, that can then develop a more sustainable economic opportunity for the companies. And I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris, and also thanks for giving us concrete examples of what also other companies and your own are doing. So now moving to Giulia. Giulia, so you're a sustainability reporting manager at EFRAG. I'll spell it out again. It's the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group. And so we're looking at the European level and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, another acronym, of the European Commission. Mandates EFRAG, your organization, to also advise on the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS, another acronym. So what are so coming back to the last acronym now, what are the ESRS, so the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and how are they relevant to disability inclusion in companies in and outside Europe?
Thank you. So thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Giulia. I'm Italian. I'm wearing the classy blue tailleur, but I'm very happy I'm wearing green shoes. So starting from the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, it sets a mandatory sustainability reporting regime for large companies in Europe, and it mandates the use of the so-called ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Key objectives are to ensure transparency and accountability while supporting, helping companies in playing a leading roles towards a more sustainable economy. The adoption of the ESRS, Common European Standards, tackle the big issue of the sustainability data quality, because with the standard in place, so large company will have to publish a sustainability report using Common European Standards, we will have reliable information, comparable information, and verifiable information on the company's sustainability performances. ESRS is a comprehensive system for sustainability reporting based on the so-called double materiality analysis, which allows companies to identify their own impacts, risks, and opportunities. We have the impact materiality that identifies impacts, companies' impacts on the planet, on the people, on the society, and we have the financial materiality, which allows companies to be aware, to identify of the risks and opportunities that are coming from sustainability matters in the short, medium, and long term. The standards, the ESRS, they cover a full range of environmental, social, and governance matters, focusing on social, where disability is mainly tackled, Social standards are clustered in 4 different stakeholder groups. We have own workforce, S1, workers in the value chain, S2, affected communities, S3, and consumers and end users, S4. These 4 stakeholder groups, I don't want to be too technical, but I really want to explain a bit the structure. So these 4 stakeholder groups, they represent the first layer that we called topic level. Then we have 2 more layers because each topic is disaggregated into different subtopics. And again, 3rd layer, each subtopic is disaggregated into different subtopics. This map of topic, subtopic, and subtopic, which is consistent for environment, social, and governance, is a map, is a list that guides companies in identifying their own sustainability matters and therefore impacts, risk, and opportunities. So for own workforce, staying social, S1 own workforce, one of the subtopics, 2nd layer, is the equal treatment and opportunity for all. And then this subtopic is split into different subtopics, and one of them is the employment and inclusion of persons with disability. So the starting point for companies is performing the double materiality analysis, again, in order for them to identify their own sustainability matters. Then companies are required to explain how they manage, how they handle these sustainability matters through their policies, actions, and targets. For example, for disability, companies should describe policies, initiatives, actions they are putting in place to have more accessible workplaces, to reduce barriers or to prevent barriers, to attract more people with disabilities. In case they have specific targets related to these policies and actions, they should also disclose them. For own workforce stakeholder group, S1, there are also metrics, because policies, action, and targets, apart from targets, we are talking about narrative description of what companies are doing. For own workforce, there are also metrics, and for disability, there's a specific disclosure requirement, which is S112, that requires companies to disclose the percentage among its employees of people with disability, plus the same disclosure requirement on a voluntary basis offer company to disclose the gender breakdown. ESRS refers to the definition provided by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It's a broad definition, and there's no common definition of disability across EU member states. And during the development process of the ESRS, with major stakeholder involvement and many discussions, several countries raised concerns related to the data collection. And so that's why the disclosure requirement S112 has a caveat which says companies shall disclose the percentage of people with disability with its own employees, subject to legal restriction on the collection of data. So the core is represented in S1, and again, this specific disclosure S112. But then ESRS refers directly or indirectly to disability in other parts. For example, staying in S1, there's also a disclosure requirement about social protection for employees in case of loss of income due to unemployment because of an injury or because of an acquired disability. The company should also disclose how it engages with vulnerable workers, people with disability being part of this category, Companies should also disclose incidents, complaints related to human rights. So here, for example, we are talking about discrimination cases based on the ground of disability, and staying social, but in the end users and consumers stakeholder group. For example, a company should disclose how it engages with the consumers and end users about impacts. And here, for example, we are talking about how the company engage with consumers and end users in order to have product and services more accessible. Disability is also tackled in the governance pillar because there's a disclosure requirement on the composition and diversity of the board, of supervisory body, management bodies. The focus is on gender, but the disclosure requirement says gender plus any other aspect of diversity that the company can consider, and disability could be one of these aspects. Just to share that it was a challenging, long process that brought ESRS to life, many stakeholders involved, and there has been an intense discussion about having companies to disclose on some topics regardless the outcome of the double materiality in a compulsory way. And own workforce was a big component of this discussion. The final outcome, the final decision was to leave up to the companies to decide which are their own sustainability matters. But even before the ESRS, I mean, we saw own workforce, employees' well-being in general as always being considered material by companies. And so we expect to see companies, when they say own workforce is material, they inevitably will have to tackle all the aspects related to the own workforce, and therefore disability will be included. Last week, you might have heard, the Commission released the so-called Omnibus Simplification Package, which will affect the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive together with the Due Diligence Directive and the Taxonomy. The most important thing is that the Commission state clear Green Deal objectives are there and they will still there. What most likely we are going to see is what will change will be the speed, basically. So we will see simplifications and some reductions for companies with more than 1,000 employees. The proposal will have to be discussed at the Council level, at the Parliament level. It will take some time, but that's... And I just want to conclude, if I had 30 seconds, that
20.
Regardless the outcome of the Omnibus Directive, what will stay is the strategic value of the sustainability reporting and the double materiality analysis. Because having companies that will have to think about their own impacts, risks and opportunities in the short, medium and long term will force companies to become more resilient, to gain skills in order to go better with the dynamic and interconnected challenges we are facing every day.
Thanks, Giulia, for a comprehensive overview and also for acknowledging, I mean, those following the development in Europe are aware that the Omnibus proposal just came out last week, and so we also in the ILO following closely. Now, I'll ask a common question to all speakers in reverse order. I would ask you to keep it to 2 minutes maximum. Same question to all of you, starting with Giulia, then Chris, Florian, Karine. So let's imagine we have this panel discussion again in 4 years from now, let's say at the Zero Project Conference 2029. So then in these 4 years, let's say, how can we best achieve that by then we can't talk about sustainability to companies, investors, sustainability standard setters, without them having made disability an integral part of sustainability structures, reporting, discussions, conversations. So, Giulia, what would you say? How do we best achieve that disability is not dropped and is an integral part of sustainability?
Right. I will be sure saying sustainability reporting can play a big role on this. And I think it's important to have in mind that the directive, the ESRS, they do not prescribe behaviors. They don't mandate companies do that, don't do that. But on the other hand, they hold companies accountable for transparently disclosing how they are doing in terms of sustainability performances. Businesses can play a crucial role in getting more inclusion, more accessibility within the workplace. So again, disability reporting offers a great opportunity for promoting inclusion, because again, having companies that they will have to disclose, to describe something, will push then again, how can we do better to be more inclusive? How can we even prevent barriers? How we can better design products and services? And transparency reporting, as I said, also strength, company, resilience. As a standard setter, I would say we obviously follow the different topic. We know it's an evolving concept, language has changed, definition might change, and so it's also possible that the specific disclosure requirement will change. But hopefully, we will see better and growing figures on the employment with persons with disability.
Thank you. Chris, you have 4 years. How do you make sure disability and sustainability are always mentioned in the same sentence?
I think from an investment or investor standpoint, we need more private capital to come to this part of the market. I think historically, from my perspective, the disability community has largely been supported by nonprofits and charities and local and federal government, and that's wonderful, and they do amazing things, but there are limitations to how much they can elevate the community. And there's a very unique opportunity right now and into the future for private capital to come into this area of the market to really provide that catalytic capital and operational assistance and expertise for early stage companies that are doing amazingly innovative things, and then to also partner with the nonprofit sector and the local and federal government to really then elevate the community to where it needs to get to, because it's not there today. And so I think that's a really important role for Samaritan to play, in addition to returning social and financial returns for our investors, but to also attract private capital that's not looking at the disability sector today.
Great, thanks a lot. Florian, so how do we do this? Disability, sustainability, one thing, almost.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to get everybody to the table, right? So the question is not who's in the room, but who's not in the room yet. Who's in the room? You see Google, you see Apple, you see Bayer, Sanofi, you see Vodafone. And that's not only here, that's all around disability inclusion. What do they have in common? They're all B2C companies. So what Mike mentioned earlier, the story, it's as much about dollars as about human rights, works relatively easy for them. It's relatively easy to make case that, hey, if you're disability inclusive, you sell more products, right? So who's not in the room? It's Mitsubishi, it's ABB, it's Lanxess. It's all the big B2C hardware companies. Why? Because the case is incredibly more difficult to make. So I cannot go to my head of sales for gas turbines and tell him, look, if you're more disability inclusive, you're going to sell more gas turbines, right? That just doesn't work that easy. So we have to find a way to get these companies to the table, to tell the story, how do they make actual dollars by being more disability inclusive? And that, I think, can work in two ways. And one I've admittedly stolen from Susan. And that is, you make the story about productivity. So you make the accommodation for your employees, they're going to deliver more output. So that's one way. The other way is disability inclusion is going to help you win in the war for talents and make you more successful. So that would be my hope, that 2029, everybody's sitting at the table.
Thank you. And just to add, of course, people with disabilities are people, and we want people to be treated fairly, equitable, no? And not missing out on amazing minds and great skill sets. So, we went, yeah, yes, right, sorry. You asked about who is not in the room. You are in the room and not us. That would be not nice, so please, over to you.
I really appreciated what you said, Chris, as an investor, because I think there will be more and more like you, because I'm really optimistic. I think there is a kind of a trend, and several ingredients are pushing in the same direction, and it will be hard to stop it. There's legislation, as Giulia said, at European level, at French level. We celebrated the 20th birthday of the Loi Handicap. And even at the US, for the moment, finger crossed, we don't see any renouncement on the side of disability and support of people with disability. Second element that supports this transition and this movement is clearly the society and how it evolves. I mean, we do have in APAC and in Europe an aging population, and the needs of this aging population are quite consistent with accessibility. And so clearly there is a market. There will be more and more people impacted. So companies and investors will have to take consideration of that. And third element, and I'm maybe speaking as Capgemini, is technology. Because we know that a lot of first designed assistive technologies have become mainstream. Everybody knows the famous TV remote control, but more recently, everything on speech-to-text, vocal panel command that were initially designed for people having an impairment have now becoming mainstreams. And Variable 500 was saying, there's no surprise that there is such a link between assistive and mainstream technologies, because by nature, technology is assistive. So all the ingredients, I think, go towards the same direction.
Great, thanks a lot. Now we have about 10 minutes for Q&As with you in the room here. So I think there are colleagues from the Zero Project who would be able to walk around. So make yourself known. If you have a question to the panelists, maybe you just state your name, your organization, and to whom the question is posed, either to all of them, a subset, or an individual. I already see one person raising their hand there.
Start again. I'm Bianca Prins. I'm Global Head of Accessibility at ING Bank in the Netherlands. And we included our disability effort specifically on S1 and S4 this year. But what I notice is that a lot of people really don't realize, and I think it's how do we educate the general business that disability is included there, because most DEI is still looking at other areas, and accessibility is often overseen. Well, especially for customers and employees, this is crucial to show your S4 commitment is not just a cultural commitment. So any of the panelists have any ideas on that?
So, Bianca, thanks. So, but if I understand correctly, didn't catch all of it, but the question is, how do we educate businesses that disability is important and that sometimes disability is not part of the DEI discussion, although it's...
Yeah, it's more getting, I think it's about the education part, and we have been discussing, and I've got my ideas, but I was also curious how the people in the panel would say, how can we get more businesses engaged in reporting on this? Because businesses also fear to report on disability.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bianca. No, I muted myself while I started speaking. Maybe a good thing. How do we educate businesses, companies, and how do we encourage them to report on disability inclusion, knowing that there might be some fear? Look, we report this and we're going to be criticized for that. Any volunteers here on the panel? Florian, I see you already have your mic on.
I think it's about constantly talking about it, creating an environment where what holds us back to speak internally is a still existing fear of stigmatization, right? So for me, it was, I tried to get a C-level executive to speak about the fact that he's colorblind on a panel on IDPD. It was not possible because the gentleman was afraid he would be stigmatized. So there's still a lot of cultural work that needs to be done. And once we're done with our own homework, we need to go use our buying power to talk to our suppliers. But I can tell you, if you talk to, for example, a body lease company, or there's a fancier term for it, but you know what I mean, in the UAE, about disability inclusion, they look at you that they will just don't understand what you're targeting, right? So we just have to keep talking. We have to shape the culture. We have to shape the speak up. We have to find many, many positive examples and amplify them.
Yeah, of course, Karine, please.
Sorry, yes. So clearly, accessibility and disability is part of our inclusion strategy that I'm leading for the group, but I would emphasize the fact that it's not so easy, in fact, to report our progress and to communicate or to disclose that, because, for instance, with gender, it's much more easier to set KPIs and to report and so on. For disability, as you mentioned, there is no global definition of disability. Same for accessibility standards. There is not one only global standard, even for digital accessibility. Same for physical accessibility. So in fact, as a global company, it clearly is a limit. We have to think how to still progressing and measure our progress, taking account the fact that we don't have such a global definition and standards to align. That's why the pledge and the tool really help us, and that's why the framework provided by the CSRD already as well helped us to try to structure a bit all of that in this a bit fluffy environment.
Can I say one quick thing? And I'm going to simplify it. I think we need more courageous leadership. I think it's a leadership challenge that we have. And like Jenny Leigh-Fleury was a great example this morning. She's been at Microsoft for, 20 years now. And I think the reason why she's been able to do what she's done there with her team is because of Satya Nadella has a very personal connection to disability. And he has made that commitment as an organization. Now listen, they're not just trying to do what's right. They're also doing it in a very profitable way, right? So like, I get back to that book I mentioned earlier, Bob's book. Disability-driven innovation and inclusion and accessibility, it's the right thing to do, but it's also really good business. And I think we're seeing more and more examples of that. But I unfortunately think it starts with senior leadership, and we need more people like Satya Nadella and others to step forward and make that commitment. But sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
Thanks so much, Chris. We would have time for one more question, I believe, or let's take two. But please keep it short. The gentleman there, just I think on the desk you have a mic you can unmute, and then the woman over there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Emil Vuningabo. I'm from Rwanda. I just want to ask a question about the use of the self-assessment tool. Is it possible to have particular training to the OPDs in different countries where they'll be able to work on the tools to be used for the companies? The second is about how the companies will be able to work with the government where the policies are not actually supporting the company to hire people with disabilities as a formative action, actually. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for these important questions, Emil. Over there.
Yes, I am Ana Yolanda from Mexico, General Manager of Panque Ayuda. It's a cooperative that generates jobs for disabled people through bakery and food. For Chris, we need to improve ourselves so we can generate more jobs. Google has tools, but it's too expensive right now for the cooperative. I ask you, yes, we understand that the big companies have troubles to install the culture of inclusive, but we are a company that we can do with you. Through your work, your Google, you are going to generate disabled people jobs. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, 45 seconds. Okay, good. Look, first, and I think having a discussion with Chris after the panel. Muchas gracias. Emil, I think the first question was, I think, directed to me regarding the self-assessment tool. The second question might not be directed to me, but I'll still reply to it anyways because we're running out of time. On the self-assessment tool, I think it's an interesting idea to train OPDs on the use of the self-assessment tool to maybe then push in a polite, convincing way, companies to adopt it, to use it. And I think we're going to learn more also from Susan about how we can also build the OPD's capacity to engage with the business community. Because business speaks a business language, OPD speaks a disability rights language. Both are good, important, but they need to come together. And I think, please, happy to explore that training of OPDs on the self-assessment tool. On businesses working with governments still having not addressed in certain countries laws, public policies that discourage even the employment of persons with disabilities. I think one of the main ways of addressing that, where we have national business and disability networks, we have them in more than 40 countries, to work through these national business and disability networks as a single voice of business on disability issues and engage the government. Look, we all committed to employing people with disabilities, but we have identified a number of issues with the laws in our country. So I think that could be a way forward. So we already probably minus negative time. I see it's a 0, 0, 0, 0. But thanks so much. I think it's important to have these conversations, especially at a time when we see a global backlash against issues of inclusion, human rights, affirmative action. So I think we want to be on the right side of history. So thanks so much for fighting the good fight, and we will definitely continue this discussion, and we're here to support and enable allies to do the same. Thanks so much.